Welcome to the Triskele podcast.
We are three druids gathered in a virtual grove
to share our thoughts and our path with you.
Hi, welcome to episode 22 of the Triskele podcast. For today's episode, it is just Drum and myself. Unfortunately, Amber was unable to join us today due to some other commitments, but we hope you enjoyed the conversation between the two of us. We're going to be talking about how we get the attention of the divine today. And let's first introduce ourselves. And my name is Victoria, and I use the pronouns she and her.
And I'm Drum, and my pronouns are he and him.
And so again, today we're going to be talking about how we get the attention of the divine. So for folks who are new to this podcast, welcome, whether you're viewing or you're listening to us. And for folks who are returning, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to view and or listen to us. So last episode, we talked a lot about how we connect to the divine and how we interact with them, but we didn't really talk about how we get their attention. And so there's a couple of different layers there. There is, how do we get the attention of somebody, someone, some divine, some spirit who is new to us? And then there is the, how do we get the attention of a divine being who we have had a relationship with? So since the last one is easier, let's start with that one. So this is easier because I don't have to just ask the question. I can ask Drum directly. How do you get the attention of a divine being that you already have established a relationship with?
In my daily workings, though, the thing that I do is I preface everything with the word hail. And so I will say, for example, hail breed, or hail Boan, for example, if I'm using the Irish pantheon. And that's always my greeting. And I feel that that's the beginning of the work. And I also try in getting that attention of sometimes centering myself in the moment. So if I'm working very specifically with a given being, I will say, hail Boan on this bright, beautiful day, or this quiet, cloudy day, just to kind of anchor myself and anchor the discussion in the moment. So that's how I kind of lead into things.
I know for myself, I tend to use the epitaphs. So there's another name for them, the by names, why can't I remember? Of course, I can remember the word when I'm not on the podcast and being filmed. But basically, the kennings, there, I knew it was in my brain, the kennings for the different deities. And so I will often call to Caradwyn, as y'all, I'm sure, pretty well figured out. I work with her quite often. And so I will often start with Caradwyn, brewer of the Omen, mother of bards. Or if I call it Freya, it's Brisingamon's bearer, falcon cloak wearer. Just multiple ways of referring to the individual that just kind of really emphasizes, no, I'm talking to you, dear person.
Right.
Please listen. And I find that maybe it's just me. Who knows, right? Because all of this stuff is experiential. But for me, repeating their name in different forms really sort of helps to bring me into alignment with that energy, that spirit, that being. And I find that's much easier to make a connection that way.
No, I agree with you. And now that you mention it, I do the same thing. And I think it's a way of, it's also kind of an honorarium in a way. Mm-hmm. For example, I'll say, hail Boan, mother of my people, or, hail Dagda, the good God, my father. And these are just phrases that I use to show at least my belief of kinship with them. And I think it is so I think it is a proper way of addressing them, honorifically, and also, a way of getting attention, some attention. Because I really think that the gods and goddesses are these multidimensional beings. I don't want to sound like weird or anything, but I really think that they have the ability to work in more dimensions than just the three that we live in. And so it always brings me back to Edwin Abbott and Flatland. How do you get the attention of a multidimensional creature or entity? And but I think that I do believe, since we try to build relationships with them, that that they are more likely to hear our call because we do know them, and hopefully they know us as well.
And I do think there's something there. I mean, we have the idea of the center of the ritual being all centers, all times, all places throughout the entire, I won't even say known universe, but unknown space, right? Like that is the multiverse, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Sort of combines there. And so I think it's the same idea of, if we build that sacred space, and it doesn't take much, especially if you're practiced, to sort of be in that sacred mental space or physical space, and then call upon their names, call upon the way that you know that deity, right? So so many people talk about Freya as being the love goddess, the goddess of love. Yeah, sure. But she's not that to me. To me, she is the goddess of sovereignty, and the one who knows what she wants and gets it with consent. So some of that is love. She's a sexual being. There's no denying that.
Right.
And so by calling upon her in the way that I know her, calling upon her as Brisingamen's bearer, brings to mind that entire myth where she exchanged 3 nights of love and care for the necklace. Calling upon her as Falcon Cloak's wearer, where she has shared her cloak with others. These are things that, in short phrases, evoke so much more than that phrase says to me. And so the way I call her is not just the words, but the emotion and the meaning behind the words.
That's really interesting. I think it's very profound, because I think it really is true. Some of the terms that I use in the workings that I do, for example, if I'm talking about the goddess Fond, who was the wife of Manannán Lir, I say hail Fond, perfect tear, which is a phrase that was used for her in the lore. So it's a way of connecting to the lore, and very much, as you said, our experiences or our perceptions of how they interact with us today may not be reflective of the lore. It may be something totally different. And so it kind of anchors us in those two worlds, the world of the lore, to recognize them for, where they were, and it also gives us the ability to talk to what they do now, or how we interact with them now. And I think that's very important. I also found that there are times for particular deities that I add more kennings than others, and I think that may just be their placement in the workings.
Let's talk about that more. What makes you choose to use more kennings or less kennings?
Because I think that some of the deities require more, or at least that I require to say more. I know that for me, for example, when I call out to Manannán Lir, I say Manannán Lir, God of the Irish Sea, Lord of the Isle of Man, he who walks upon the waves. So, I actually think that Manannán Lir is also I can call to mnemonic lyric for Lake Erie, which is just behind me, but I'm using, I'm attaching myself to the lore and then bringing it forward. He still walks upon the waves in my world. And so I think it's once again honorific, and once again a reminder for myself, because I think part of it to calling out to the gods is to honor them, to call to them, but also to build a memory in ourselves, kind of us like a spiritual muscle memory where these things come very naturally. And by the repetitive nature of these things, it's just part of my practice that is just pretty ingrained after time.
Yeah, that repetitive nature is something I think that is really important. The terms that I use, the honorifics I use, the kinnings I use for Freya and Caradwyn are relatively set. There are terms that I have, they're phrases that I have, I've created them. They're not phrases I've taken from anyone else, knowingly. But that's how I call them now. Like that has become the way that I call these individual beings over time, because that's what it means to me. But that's my interpretation of the divine.
Right.
Right. And again, I think so much of this is about how you connect to the divine. What makes sense to you to call to them? I think the experience, the emotion, the intent is so critical to this. Like I can imagine people being like, "Hail Freya, Brisingamen's wearer,
Goodness.
Njord's daughter, Falcon Cloak wearer," and she's going to be like, "Yeah, like just like, yeah, no, that doesn't count." But calling her as Falcon Cloak wearer, Brisingamen's bearer, like, and putting the emotion behind it really is what matters. And I think that's where new folks get tripped up. Right. So let me turn this around a little bit. If you were going to advise someone new who wanted to call upon a deity, and this I'm kind of going now back into the like, what if you don't know them? How would you advise them?
What I usually tell people is, get into a kind of a meditative state and think about that deity and see what impressions come to you, and build upon those impressions, because I think that what comes to you is perhaps it's only your own imagination, but perhaps it's an invitation that allows you to get to know them better. And I think it's kind of, it's like establishing a protocol. You get some suggestions on how to speak to them, and I think you have to really open your heart and open your mind when you do so, because you are speaking to a deity that is not in front of you, that is, in the multiverse, as you said, which is a wonderful word. They're in the multiverse, but they are not in front of us. So we have to learn how to speak to them, and they have to learn how we can understand them, because I think that their ability to communicate is wonderful. I think that our ability to understand that needs some work. And so I think it's a question of trying it over time. And I also think that the important thing is to set aside a place for them. It could be the smallest of places on a desk, but I think it's also important that we have the ability to focus our attention in one particular area. It could be a tree, it could be a desk, could be whatever. But I think, this is Caradwyn's tree, or this is Manannan's lake, for example.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on that, because my altar, which many folks have seen, I will include a photo somewhere in this, has no idols on it whatsoever. It is a very generic altar. And it is the place that I worship all of the gods that I work with. I've had altars in the past that have had like a statue of Caragrin or a statue of Freya or Frigga. I mean, the statues of Freya and Frigga are currently out in my like living room altar. But as far as my main space, I find the iconography is distracting.
And I think that makes sense because you're a practiced participant.
Right.
I think for somebody who's just starting out, who doesn't have those kind of things, I think adding focus to it. The main part of my working altar is a Huasi stone, which is just a stone that is, it's like a screen. You can project what you want upon it. So I think that ultimately you don't need it. You don't need it. But I think in the beginning, it's at least if you concentrate on a focal point, it may help.
I mean, admittedly, I am of the camp that we need no tools. Tools are useful, but not required. But yeah, no, I agree with you. And so one of the things that I've done in the past was, for instance, so Reverend Ian Corrigan has a set of altar cards, I guess. I don't know of a better way to describe them. I'll include a link in the description. That he has them on, you can buy them online, and they're his imagery of a variety of different options. He has one of Caragrin. And so I've used that card. So just put that card on the altar. So put basically a flat image, which you can get online. You can print one out. You can buy a bunch. I have a really, really cool picture of Odin as the Wanderer. And I've used those in the past as focus items. But I guess I've used them for so long I don't need them anymore because I can picture them in my head, so I'm good. But definitely for new folks, having those tools really helps to focus.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't necessarily need the icons as well, although I have to tell you, I mean, I do a weekly Hellenic rite, and today I just got a Hestia statue, so I had Hestia and Hecate and Demeter all together, and it was, I usually don't have that, but I kind of liked it. It was kind of like, wow. It was like, it was fairly powerful, but most of the time I do my workings outside. Not inside, so I have to. My altar is movement on a trail, so I think it's not necessarily required, I should say.
Right, and I think it's important for folks to realize that you don't need to go buy these statues. Some of them can be ridiculously expensive. Some of them are reasonable. Depends on where you get them from. And if that speaks to you, there's some Caradwin statues that I'm like, no.
Right.
And it's not required. There's pictures on the internet you can print out. If you don't have a printer, look at the picture, just picture it in your mind. Like whatever works for you is good enough. Don't feel that you have to have stuff to worship.
Right. That's a good point. I remember early on in my devotional work, I saw somewhere on the internet an image of Jen Kett, one of the Irish healers, and it was very generic, not historically, described or accurate in any way, but it just like totally resonated with me, and I printed it off. And I used it. I mean, I used the print version for a few days, and I never used it after that. I just really, I can still see that image, and it still stayed with me. And but now I think after working with it over time, I don't need the image anymore. I just need the connection.
Right. And again, it's useful to have the image when you're trying to make the connection.
Right.
One of these days, I will finally finish the ritual that I am threatening. I'm threatening myself to finish of how to connect to deity within an ADF sort of framework. But well, let's talk about that a little bit more. So if you have a deity in mind that you would like to connect to, let's say Breege, right? You work with Breege, I sort of work with Breege. How would you advise somebody to build that relationship and build that connection and be able to actually get their attention?
I think it's good to have a connection point, like like a link of some sort. So a breed's cross comes to mind as being something very practical. It doesn't have to be actually the physical breed's cross. It can be just an image of a breed's cross. But I think holding that as you do the work, it's kind of a connection point. It's I touch this, I hold this, and so as I press into it, I try to enhance or energize that connection point between myself and the deity. Uh, I think that's worked for me in the past. And then once again, over time, the need for that kind of disappears. But I think that there's some value at first. And for me, it's not so much, it's just a way of reaching across that symbol to connect with the deity. I see the breed's cross really as in some ways as a sun wheel, as this moving object.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about that, I can see her, and but it's one of the ways of doing so. So I think having that kind of tactile connection point is a good way to begin.
And a breed's cross is something you can make for yourself out of pretty much next to nothing. We'll include instructions in the description.
Right.
I think that like that's almost like to bring it to sort of more modern times, having somebody's Instagram name or TikTok name or Facebook name, where you send them a DM, but you're like, I'm one of those random people that they aren't really connected to them yet, that I don't know.
Right.
I think that to really connect with them, it's also really important to build that relationship. And so the laying out of offerings, they may take them, they may not. You don't know. You haven't formed the relationship yet. But it's kind of like if you think of the birds, right? Like, so if you've got, so I live on the 10th floor. If I want birds to show up, I should put birdseed out. And then maybe the cardinals that I would like to show up will show up, or the robins will show up. Maybe other birds will show up. But I'm going to keep putting birdseed out until the birds that I want to show up are going to show up. And if I happen to know that cardinals like a certain type of birdseed, I'm going to put that kind out. And I feel like it's some of that. There's a, it's not quite to that extreme, but there's a bit of a layer of like, find out what they like. Find out what that deity likes, what other people say that deity likes. Do your own meditation and divination on what they like, and put those offerings out and call their names and use their symbols and try to gain their attention. And by layering those things on, you're more likely to gain their attention.
Absolutely. I think the offerings are critical because it's a way to get, as you say, to get their attention. And it's, a gift doesn't require a gift, but a gift sure makes a difference sometimes when you want to get to know someone.
A gift invites a gift in return. It doesn't
Absolutely.
require it, but it invites it.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if you want to have a conversation with someone, you can invite them for coffee. Because sharing a coffee, you might share a conversation.
Right. Exactly. So are there any other thoughts that you have on how folks might reach out and get a response from, whether that is whatever level of response that happens to be, from a specific deity?
I think sometimes, I think that there are times that we get messages indirectly, and those would be messages that are intuitively received. So, or in dreams. Although from my own experience, um, messages from the divine in my dreams, if I do get them, I don't seem to remember them very often. But I knew intuitively that there are times that I'm going through my workings where all of a sudden I will have an idea, um, and it'll kind of keep coming, and I'll incorporate that into my working. So I think we have to be open to intuitions. We are grounded in the physical world, but I think we have to be open to the spiritual world, and listen to what comes your way, because it may be coming from the entity that you're dealing with, especially if it's going to help with that relationship. So I think be open to the suggestions that come to you in your world.
And I think it's really important for us to sort of combine that being open with spiritual discernment.
Yes.
So if you get the idea of, I should do this, take a moment to question that. Does that make sense? I should offer raw butter to Breege. Yeah, that makes total sense. I should go slaughter a cow for Breege. That may not make a whole lot of sense for me.
Right.
I have no idea how to kill a cow honorably or respectfully. No clue. So that's not going to make sense for me. I can go get that organic raw butter, or I can even go get some non-processed milk and make the butter myself. Like, I know how to do that, and offer that to her. But try to take a layer of, does that make sense for me, my situation? And does that make sense for the deity and what we know about them?
I think you're right, and I think that also extends to the kind of offering. So, yes. I oftentimes, for some of the workings that I do, I put out a small glass of whiskey that gets consumed, and I think that you do not have to buy the most expensive bottle of whiskey to make a reasonable offering. I think that if you get what you consider to be an appropriate, um, kind of whiskey, that's much more important. For me, I like to use 100 proof whiskey because it evaporates slower and leaves less residue. Right. And so I think that it's a question of, see what works for you. If you find that it works and that this is working in the relationship, by all means, keep doing it. I mean, it opens the door for you. But sometimes, see what else can come up. But yeah, overly elaborate or complicated, or killing a cow, that would be extreme.
I mean, I would be really okay with that much beef, but I don't know how to kill a cow humanely, so I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But I will also say that do what makes sense for you. Just because you think a deity or a being would like something, say for instance, you have a deity who would like 100 proof, but you're a recovering alcoholic and you'd rather not have alcohol in your house, or for whatever reason. That's fine. Don't get the alcohol. Ask them what else they'd like. Maybe they would like some really strong tea. There's this amazing smoky tea that Odin really likes. Totally my opinion, but it's worked for me. We do drink alcohol in this house, but we don't always have a lot of variety of alcohol. And sometimes I look for options. So for me, for instance, talking about Ogham, I tend to work with the wanderer aspect of him, which I see as an old man with a hooded cloak and a pipe. I offer tobacco. My granddad smoked tobacco. It also has this very, very, my granddad smoked a pipe specifically. So it also has this very emotional connection to me. And that has worked well for me as an offering to Omen. So offer what makes sense to you. And sort of going back where Drum was talking about that sort of that gut feeling. When I'm looking for an offering for a deity that I don't normally work with or a new deity, I will sort of think through my options. Like, okay, well, let's see. I have cornmeal. Yeah, that doesn't feel so good. Okay, great. I have apples. Nope, don't feel so good. I have watermelon. That feels good. Okay, great. I'm gonna go with watermelon. Like, and it's kind of your body's reaction to what feels good. Try that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that there are certain people that use, for example, offerings of coffee in the morning or tea, because you're sharing what you have with the entities in question, and I think that is beautiful. I think it's just stunningly beautiful, and I hear so many people that use coffee or tea as an offering.
Admittedly, I use Diet Coke because I don't drink coffee in the morning.
Right. But I mean, they all work, and they're all giving what you have and what you're using. It's very practical.
It's sharing the meal.
Yes. Exactly.
So I had this, you know how you have these times that sort of stick out in your head, right? So one of these times is I was working for a company I happened to know how much money they had in the bank account. And it wasn't very comforting. And so I walked out back. I had a Diet Coke in my hand because that's what I was drinking. And I poured some out to Freya. And I asked her to help us keep going because there were a lot of really good people in this company. And we really did need to be abandoned. And I literally just walked out the back door, piece of shrubbery, poured out some of my Diet Coke out of my can, said a prayer, walked back in. Yeah, we landed the venture capitalist fund and we were able to keep going. It works.
Absolutely.
Share what you have. It doesn't matter what it is. It is a thing that makes you keep going, whether it's a drink or a bit of your meal or something that you've bought special for them. And one of the things that I always find is that if you establish a regular practice, so I have my tiny little altar and I live in a very small space. I have a tiny little altar and I give very small amounts of offerings, but I give them most days. And when I want something big and I can give something bigger, because I have been consistently giving something small, the something big really gets their attention. And so do what you can. When you really need them, that's when you want to like really focus and spend the energy or money or time or whatever it is you have to spend to give them the bigger offering.
Right. That's a very good point. The thing is that I think when dealing with entities such as this, know your own limits, and I think you have to treat them as family or as friends or as something special, because I would hate to think that people would enter into a relationship and be miserly, especially with the powers that be. I don't think that would pay proper dividends, so I think.
I think that given some people's challenging relationship with their family, thinking of the deities and the spirits that we work with as chosen family.
Yes, very good.
The people you choose to be family with, the friends that you choose to be family with,
right,
is a sort of better framing.
Right. Kindreds, so to speak, in a way.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And so don't put yourself in the poorhouse, because if you can't afford anything, you're no help to anybody, including yourself.
Right.
But I know I think of sort of when I frame my relationship with the deities, with all spirits, it is very much in the framing that we have with humans. If I'm friends with somebody, so I have got some, I'm in a country, I moved countries, I don't have a whole lot of friends at the moment because pandemic, but when I was living in a space where I had a lot of friends, I would invite my friends over and I would offer them whatever I had, and it would be wine out of my wine fridge, or it would be tea, or it would be cookies or cake, or whatever felt appropriate for that particular individual. And so, but I wouldn't go crazy with it, right? Like, I'm not going to go buy some insanely $100 bottle of wine to go share with somebody, because why? Most of my friends have a fairly baseline level of wine flavor, right? Like, they're not going to care. So I buy good wine we enjoy, and I share the stuff we enjoy with them. And if beans and rice are a thing you enjoy, share that with them.
Absolutely.
There's always the cautionary tale about giving champagne to Tyrannus. Jerome and I both know a priest who once upon a time decided that Tyrannus should get champagne instead of the whiskey, I think it was, that he was standardly given. And Tyrannus did not appreciate the champagne, to say the least. There was many thunderstorms, it was bad. So if you give an offering, I think give your offering with the intention of, this is what I have to share. In that particular case, the priest making the offering could very well afford the thing that the deity wanted. He was just trying to go by easy by offering the thing that he wanted. So, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
So, offer what you have. Offer it with the intention of, this is what I have to share. You may get a response back, that's not what I want. That's okay. Ask what they want. Go into a meditative state, go into a trance state, and ask what they want. If you can, walk through your kitchen in that state and see what looks appealing. Because for everybody that talks about they hear gods in their head, most of us are really interpreting bodily sensations or mental sensations.
And if you do make an offering that, you get the sense that they say no to that offering, it is not the end of the world. I go back to a fortune that I got in a fortune cookie many years ago. It said, never mistake a single defeat for a final defeat. So don't think that just because there's this particular offering wasn't good, that you've destroyed this relationship with this entity, or that they are angry at you now. I don't think that's the case. I think that it's just, they're just saying, hey, no, I don't want that particular thing.
No, I think you have to work a lot harder than that to anger a deity.
Right.
But if you get that no, try something else.
Absolutely.
Look at their lore. Look at what other people have been saying has been their experience.
Right.
So the lore doesn't have you offering tobacco to Ogham or coffee, but I know many people who do both. One or the other, or both. So explore a little bit.
Right.
You are highly unlikely to piss off a deity that much.
Exactly.
You got to work hard at it. You're going to really know if you do.
Right. And the other thing is that if you're having, if you're having difficulty in establishing a rapport with the deity, and you give them something and they say no, they're listening.
That's true. You got a response.
You got a response. So I would take that as not as a discouraging sign, but an encouraging sign.
Also, I would keep in mind that you don't have to have a super deep level of relationship with every deity.
Right.
So I have 3 deities that I work with closely, and many, many more that I have a relationship with. And I honor them and I worship them, but I don't work with them really deeply. Right? Breege is one of them. I work with her. Every Imbolc, she gets a special offering from me. But beyond that, kind of as need arises, and that's fine. And that works out just fine for the two of us. And so don't feel that you have to have, and don't feel you have to have any deity that you work closely with. Like, that is not a requirement by any way, shape, or form to be a druid or a witch or a pagan or a heathen or however you categorize yourself. Like, that is not required. If you choose to call out to a deity, try a few things. They're individuals. They have agency. They can say, I'm not that really interested right now. And that's okay. Maybe later, maybe never. Who knows? But that doesn't change who you are. And so if you feel the need for that connection, reach out to somebody else. Reach out to spirit in general and say, hey, who wants to talk to me?
Right. See who answers.
And then use spiritual discernment to make sure the person you answered is the person you think they are.
Exactly.
But like, be open, be willing to experiment. And other than very close practices, even then, don't feel that you need permission to contact a deity. Some deities will only work with you within a close practice, and if they reach out to you, you should go find someone of that close practice to see if they will welcome you into that practice and do the work to study and become part of that group. But outside of that, go for it.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that our sense of linear time may or may not be shared by these entities, because if you think that, I think that people will find who are starting out that they may establish relationships with some entities rather quickly. And there may be other ones that take a rather long time to establish that relationship. So be patient. Don't give up. Especially if you get a no, then a no is a no. But I think that if, I wouldn't expect anything to happen too quickly, but persevere.
Well, and there's a difference between a no and a not that.
Yes, exactly.
So I think this is where divination really comes in handy. If you are proficient in the use of a pendulum, the use of tarot, runes, Ogham, whatever, you can use those tools to understand, was that a not that, or was that a no? And if you're not proficient, there are many, many people in many areas who are willing to do that for you. Admittedly, usually for some kind of exchange, which is often money. But at the same time, if you have a friend who knows how to read the tarot or Ogham or pendulums or runes or Greek oracle or any other kind of divinatory system, reach out to them and see if they'll help you.
Right.
Like or learn how to do one of those things yourselves, right? That's also an option. A pendulum is super, super inexpensive. You can literally get a rock on a thread, and that's a pendulum. And see what they say and help. There are times when we want so badly something to be true. that when it's not true, we assume the complete opposite, that it's absolutely not true. It'll never be true. And it's horrible and the world's exploded and I'm a terrible person. And that's just usually not the way it is.
Right.
So find, even if you just have a friend who you can talk to about this kind of stuff, and you can say, this was my experience, what do you think? And have somebody to bounce stuff off of. Super incredibly helpful. Do it online. There's resources online. There's hopefully maybe people in person. Whatever works for you, try it.
Right. And there's also apps that you can get for your phone that will do divinations for you.
True.
And those, some of them are, some Ogham ones and Futhark ones are free.
There's some tarot ones that are free as well.
Exactly. And even I Ching, there's insights to be gained from that. And there are times where if you are uncertain, they can really give you some amazing direction, because you'll see what they say. Sometimes it'll be like, oh no, that doesn't mean anything to me. But other times it's like, oh my goodness, yeah, I get that.
You mean like my readings this morning that I'm just glaring at, going, I don't want to hear you?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so do what you can. That may not be possible for everybody. I recognize that. And so this is gonna sound crazy. Sorry if it does. If you have no one to talk to, go talk to a tree. I'm serious. I'm not actually kidding. Go find a tree in your yard, in a park, wherever. And whisper to it under your breath. The breath needs to come out, but you don't have to like audibly vocalize. Tell the tree what you experienced and ask the tree what it thinks. And then see what your gut says.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Ask a tree. Go hug a tree. Go ask a tree. Trees are awesome, man.
Absolutely.
And it's a way to find that space where you can tell another being what you experienced and both process it internally and see what that being has to respond. If you can touch the tree, that's even better.
Oh, absolutely.
If you can hug the tree, that's awesome. But admittedly, there are in some places people would think you're crazy for that. So maybe don't do it if you get in trouble. But I'm a fan of trees.
Me too.
Or plants. Talk to a house plant. Whatever. It works. Living thing.
Listen to a stream.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, I think we will end for today. It's been a great conversation. I'm really sorry Amber couldn't join us for this. But for now, we will start with and Omen for the next few weeks. And Drum, you were going to do that?
Yes, please.
Are you using the Ogham, the Greek?
I'm using the Ogham this time.
Okay.
This is my sky blue Ogham set.
Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, it's I made it by mistake, but I actually kind of like it. The first Ogham is Gort, the Ivy, and the Ivy tells us that we should look within. The Ivy has a way of kind of working its way into places. It doesn't really extend out very well, but it likes to dig in. So I think that the lesson of Gort is to take a look within and examine what's going on inside. Actually, not a bad idea when you're trying to establish communication with other entities.
Indeed.
The next Ogham, and I'm using the Colin Murray system, is called Coad, and Coad is the Grove. And it represents a protected space and the collection of all knowledge. And it's a good place to find yourself within because you're surrounded by all this knowledge and surrounded by all these, in this case, in this image, all these trees. So it's a place of wisdom and protection. And then the final one is Alim. Alim is the silver fir, and what it tells us is because it's a very tall tree, it talks about high sight and long vision and the ability to look down the road, past the forest, over the forest, and approximate where you want to go. So I think that what this really says is take a look within, feel the comfort and protection of the world around you and those that care for you. And after you've collected yourself, looked within, and felt that comfort, then look down the road, put a cat on your lap, and try to see what's coming ahead. So I think it's a case for using divination to help you find that way.
Cool. I think that reading works well with what we've been discussing.
I think so too.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you
We do.
in the next few weeks. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's video. If you liked this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. You can also find more episodes on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast providers. You can find us on social media on Facebook and Twitter, or for more information, visit our website, triskelepodcast.weebly.com.